good? We'll open the floor straight for questions for Coach Kelly.
I guess what happened in the second half, you guys were hanging in there, playing well, and then it just really went away from you.
I just didn't think we executed well on either end of the floor in the second half. You know, we didn't defensively. We didn't do a good job of containing a Corey like we. You know, he's the best player on the floor, so you got to account for him. And you know, just we didn't do a great job on that end, and it makes it hard when he hits his three. You know, he made free throws as well. You know, he's great at drawing fouls, and he did that all game long. So he just put so much pressure on us. And again, it was just the most disappointing thing about us on the defensive end was that we did not do a good job of containing him and giving the ball handler a cushion to know where his help was. And you know, these are things that you know you go over, and you know we didn't have any game carryover. And then the second half, in terms of you know our shooting, you know it speaks for itself. We shot 51 in the first half, and we shot 35 in the second. You know, and so that's a recipe for disaster when you can't get stops, and you know then you're not shooting the ball well.
Right here on the right.
Yeah, Coach, can you just reflect a little bit on, the West Coast trip, what worked, what didn't work, as a whole?
I mean, I would say pockets of Cal, and for the first half of this game, I thought that we made strides, and we come out in the second half, and I didn't recognize us, and so that leaves a sour taste, and I think all of our mouths as we board the plane. Right now we got some things we got to figure out. We're we're in a space right now where we have about 4 to 5 more games coming up where it's going to be pretty much our season, and we got to figure some things out. That's where we're at. We got 2 big games coming up, and we got to figure some things out. But I would be lying if this second half of this game, bleeding into us getting on the plane, it leaves a sour taste in my mouth. And again, where we're at right now, we gotta figure some things out real quick.
To the left right here.
All right, Coach. We know you were a phenomenal guard back in college in the Pac-10, and then also you had your NBA career. So when you see somebody doing what Corey's doing as a freshman, unheralded freshman, no one really knew about him as much coming out of high school. So what do you say when you say this guy is out here really doing it, even though he's doing it against us?
It's really amazing, to be honest with you. Again, seeing him in person and seeing him on film is 2 different things. He had 40 points on 21 shots. We always talk about, making guys work. We didn't do a great job of that this evening. He's slithery. He has a nice hesitation. He draws fouls. And when he's making threes, it makes him that much harder to guard. And then when he's in transition, he can use either hand as well. What that tells me is that, again, I've been playing against Kyle since we were in the WCC, and he's always done a good job of evaluating and coming up and having really good guards. But he doesn't get the same type of publicity as the other players, the other freshmen around the country. But in terms of guards, I'm hard pressed to believe there's a lot better than him. Better than him.
We'll go in the back right here.
Yeah, just without Reeves, your leading scorer, how hard was that to have to play tonight?
I mean, obviously that's there, but we were down. We were right there in the game. You can't. Look, man. It's one of them things where I can sit up here and talk about what I don't got. And, I'm not gonna do that. That's not the reason we lost. Did we miss the 16th? Of course we did. But he didn't play on Wednesday as well, and we were right there to win. And the reality of it is that we got to do a better job, because right now what we're doing is we're good enough to stay in games, but just good enough to lose the game as well. And at the end of the day, we got to get over the hump, whether waste is available or not. So I'm not going to use that as a crutch. And I know that's not what you were asking or saying, and I understand that as well. But I take the good with the bad,
Respect that,
so to
yeah.
say. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Kelly.
You brought Eric in, and he gave you a little bit of a spark. Obviously, you can see kind of the freshman stuff defensively and some of the lapses there. But kind of, what did you see, and what made you decide to roll the dice on him today?
He's had a good couple weeks, and he's earned that right. He's been doing everything we asked. And, I thought in the first half he came in, and I thought he did some really good things. The second half he didn't have the same impact, but it's hard to ask someone to come in, under them circumstances and do the things that we would have needed for us to be successful at that time. But I did. I thought he played well. I thought his conditioning was there. Like you said, obviously it's some freshman things that we can. I can nitpick, but it's not about nitpicking. He did a good job today, and he was one of the bright spots.
Final question right here.
Hey, Coach, I know you came out here for a California doubleheader and business as usual, but there's something else going on here in the Bay Area, the whole Super Bowl extravaganza. Will you watch the game tomorrow, or are you going to have any kind of participation?
Well, yeah, I'll watch the game like everybody else. It's funny. My former owner, Paul Allen. Obviously, he owned Seattle, and there was the one thing that Paul was really good at when I was there. He really connected both teams. So he would allow us to go up to we would go to their practice. They came down to a lot of our games as well. Cortez, Kennedy, and a lot of those guys. I actually knew. So there's kind of history there. And then the crazy thing about it was Pete Carroll was there, and he was a Pacific alum. So when I went to Pacific, I went up there, spent time with them guys, and so it's a lot of for me it's seeing that or being there, and then going to Boston, now New England, and Robert Kraft sat right next to our bench, so I'll definitely watch the game. I don't have no horse in the race, but I'll watch the game.
Great. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, Coach.
All right.